So, I'm an OG Winx fan. My main form of interaction with the franchise as a child had been through the comics and merch, and the show was less important. And so keeping up with new seasons as they came out was also less important to my identity as an adult fan. But of recent, whilst hunting for clips for videos, I've seen bits of Season 6, and I realised both that Season 6 was the season I've seen the least of, and that what bits I did come across were kind of charming. I keep being told that Season 6 is the worst season of the Winx Club, although people say that about basically every season, I think. But now I want to find out for myself in the form of this commentary series. I want to take Season 6 for what it is, and approach it with the childlike intent of ultimately enjoying it. Of course, it is inevitable that my adult perspective that is nostalgic for the older seasons comes through in places. However, I hope I never fall into the trap of blind dismissal. So I hope you're on board with me, and let's start with the first 2 episodes, one of which I didn't really like, and one of which I actually really enjoyed. The inspiration of Sirenix. The first episode of the season opens on the Trix as Icy leads them deep underwater. It was my first time watching the Nickelodeon English dub, and I found Darcy's voice a little bizarre. Stormy and Icy sound suitably witchy, but Darcy sounded almost too sweet.
They keep defeating us!
Meanwhile, in Domino, Bloom is having breakfast with her family. First thing first, I really like the backgrounds and landscapes in these Flash seasons. You can pause any time for a wallpaper. We see that Daphne is struggling with being corporeal again, and she quickly gets overwhelmed by all the party plans Bloom, Oratel, and Marian have concocted for her. I have to say, Daphne's lack of self-assuredness ruins her previous magic. I disagree that she had to stay a ghost to maintain her majestic, mystical, ethereal aura from previous seasons and the films, but this isn't really it either. As Daphne runs out of the room, Daddy of the Year remarks that he just doesn't understand what's going on with her, but I guess we already knew that parenting didn't come naturally to Oratel. Back underwater with the Trix, we learned that the witches want revenge on Daphne and the Winx by releasing the Beast of the Depths, the only thing stronger than the Dragon Flame. Bloom and Daphne have a moment on the balcony, discussing Daphne's fear that she has lost her powers. I probably should have brushed up on Season 5 before I launched into this, but I don't actually understand where all of this is coming from and why it has to be confronted immediately as the opening move of the season instead of throughout as a character arc. The Winx and the Specialists show up, and Daphne once again has a clumsy girl moment. It's sad seeing the majestic Empyrean Daphne reduced to physical comedy. I really do think that Daphne's return to corporeal existence and her struggles with her identity after spending 20 years as a ghost are a viable storyline, but I wish she had kept her wise, stoic persona through it. Daphne has a bout of panic seeing the preparations for the party. Nice to see the Magic Adventure Maids. So the Winx take her aside to give her a very overwhelming makeover.
Don't fight, you can't win.
Stella refers to Daphne's scarf as a 90s muffler. Presumably, Daphne is now ready enough because Marian and Oratel introduced their heir to the crowd. It was cool to see these 2 princes from Magic Adventure in the background. But before the party can even start, guess who? The Trix show up, monster in tow, and the Specialists are the first to launch into action. One of the things about early Winx is how dynamic and cool the action scenes were, but I don't think you need the comparison to mark this as a disappointing fight scene. King Oratel and the Specialists are just standing around in the middle of a battle against apparently one of the most powerful creatures in the magical dimension. The Trix are just floating around, the Winx are just standing there, and Daphne's whole thing is that she has literally frozen up. So undynamic. People barricade themselves inside the castle as Daphne tearfully explains that the Beast of the Depths cannot be defeated, only controlled, and as the Nymph of Rocaluce, she could do it, but she has lost confidence in her own powers. The Winx consult their guardians. Also, look how sparkly pretty their wings are. And the guardians unhelpfully tell them that they need to find the inspiration of Sirenix. And I would like to stress, again, that there is a creature outside, and everyone is just standing around, watching the Winx just standing around. So the Winx decide to fly to Light Rock Lake, and the Tricks decide to abandon their mission of tormenting Daphne, or at least the satisfaction of seeing it happen, and fly off in pursuit. I really don't understand why they did this. In the middle of the peak of action, the Winx leave the whole planet for a side quest. This episode is like you're 8 on the playground with your friends, and you're just going through the obvious playbeats. We're at a party. Oh no, the Tricks brought a monster. We can't defeat it without special insert name here object or concept. Let's go to that other patch of grass so we can find it. Oops, the Tricks have followed us. Let's defeat them here. And when I think about it that way, you know what? I actually like it. So anyway, it turns out that the Winx themselves are the inspiration of Sirenix, I think. So this was all a waste of time. Meanwhile, Daphne has decided she's going to sacrifice herself, but thankfully the beastie is nice enough to wait as the Winx help Daphne believe in herself again. But eventually, even his patience runs out. The need to rescue Bloom snaps Daphne out of her damsel routine, and I really like Daphne's Sirenix. And again, we get a nice little wallpaper. Aesthetic. The beast is defeated, and the party can finally begin, with the Winx as the center of attention. I really think the first episode of every season should be able to introduce the world and characters to a potentially new audience, and give a sense of the stakes, themes, and tensions of the upcoming season. This episode, at least from what I can tell in this early moment, does none of those things. Beyond Bloom and Daphne, none of the other central protagonists of the story are actually successfully established in this episode. You've learnt nothing about these characters. The Tricks start the episode by stating that they are always defeated by the Winx, and end the episode being pathetically defeated by the Winx, which does a poor job of establishing them as a threat for the rest of the season. No new elements unique to our new season are introduced in this episode. The only new conflict, Daphne's loss of confidence in her powers, is resolved by the end of these 20 minutes. This reads more like an epilogue to Season 5 than anything else. I think a good season does contain one-off episodes that don't necessarily serve the wider arc but are important for characterizations and exploring relationships between characters. However, they should not be the first episode, in my opinion. So I actually accidentally watched episode 2 first because of how they were compiled on YouTube, and I actually think episode 2 should have been the real pilot of the season. It's just much punchier in meeting all those beats I mentioned. The Legendarium. It's the start of the new school year, and it's good to see some of the old girls back, still working on their enchantics. I've always really liked background school fairies. We'll see if they get more of a role this season. Daphne is also back, although I actually don't know if she's ever meant to have gone to Althea. She is here as the new History of Magic teacher, and in this moment, suffering under Bloom's constant barrage of toxic positivity. And then Bloom tells her,
If anybody knows the history of magic, it's you!
which feels like a neg. In the Winx apartment, we get to see the other girls. See, this episode is already much better at introducing the setting, the location, and the broader ideas of the characters from the get-go. Aisha's doing sports, Misa's listening to music, Flora's at her plants. We've talked before on this channel about Winx's use of superficial coding and its harms and benefits. Like its contemporaries, Winx uses certain convenient imagery and sometimes stereotypes, some of them potentially more harmful than others, to get across certain ideas about its characters. But the thing with Winx is that historically it hasn't just left those there. Winx does go and subvert those expectations. As the show went on though, it's no secret that Winx was less and less good at this, and throughout these commentaries I'm going to be on the lookout for that. On the other hand, I do understand the need for a simple, quick way to get a young audience on board with this many protagonists by referencing broad concepts they're familiar with. This is the first time these characters are introduced in this season, so what counts more is what comes after this. Something I haven't talked about so far is the weird, stilted quality of dialogue in these episodes. There are just awkward pauses between each character speaking, like between Daphne and Bloom in the previous episode, or in this scene where the camera has to stop moving before the character speaks. I don't really understand why this happens, and it's kind of an obstacle to enjoyment. We next see that Stella is planning on opening a couture boutique at Althea. Once again, really gorgeous background design in this scene. I like seeing some of her older dresses on the rack. The girls see that Stella is hard at work on her collection, Stella Couture, and find out that they are her muses, which leads to a disappointing change of clothes. I think the problem isn't the design, but the colours. I like the ode to school uniform, but I wish each one was in each girl's colour scheme. Stella is one of the harder characters to adapt. With a new target audience in mind, I understand the need to simplify the characters. However, this feels like too hard a reduction. Stella was always interested in fashion, but more in being fashionable, as part of her need to be seen, or at least that's how I interpreted it. Yes, she sometimes designed outfits, but it was to satisfy this aesthetic sense. In my opinion, Stella wanting to become the most sought-out designer in the magical dimension is sort of out of character. It's taking this broad way she was marketed too literally. She is the princess of Solaria, this isn't the type of validation she needs. But it's early in the season, so let's see what they do with it. Stella has to hide her boutique from Griselda because she has no business license, and the girls are called to the new History of Magic classroom to hear Faragonda's address. The pixies show up, so we're quickly introduced to them as a concept too. And yes, it's trite and formulaic, but also the Winx world is big and diverse, and so I don't mind this utilitarian way to reintroduce all these elements so that we can get to the plot as quickly as possible. I think it would have been nicer though if a bunch of pixies had shown up and the Winx's ones happened to be among them, rather than everything in the world circling back to being about the Winx. The pixies are here to throw a party in honor of Faragonda's 100th year as headmistress. And I guess the absolute mess of the Winx timeline is practically a feature at this point. Also, I'm not sure how I feel about Sherry being able to change the whole weather. The distinction between fairy magic and pixie magic was never explained in detail, but we do get a vibe that it's different, and pixie magic has certain limitations. Even for a witch or a fairy, whether in the comics or the show, changing the whole weather is treated with a certain gravitas, but Sherry here just clicks her fingers and there's the sun. And this is the kind of little thing that ruins the world building, and it's just easy not to do, you know? Meanwhile at Cloud Tower, Madame Griffin is also introducing the new school year, and it's good to see some of the old girls in the back, especially Lucrezia, my best girl. Amongst the new students is Selena from Earth. Selena's power is that by reading from the myths of the worlds in her book, the Legendarium, she can bring them to life. As a demonstration, Selena reads the Gloomywood Trolls, who according to legend are trapped beneath Pixie Village, back into being. Also, I really love the Pixie Village redesign. I'm like one of 5 people who really like the Pixies in general, so I love the attention to them. Ninfea, leadress of Pixie Village, summons the pixies at Althea into a pixie huddle, cute, and informs them of the situation. The Winx follow their pixies to Pixie Village, and the ensuing fight scene is really good. Compared to how static the fight in episode 1 was, this one was exactly what I was looking for. Angle changes, exciting power use, and just a sense of tension and dynamism throughout. Griffin wants to see the chaos at Pixie Village, and she casts the spell Magic Eye. And for a second I thought it was going to summon that creature from season 1, the Arachnicam or whatever, but no, it's just a spell. She asks Selena to end the destruction, and Selena obeys, but when the trolls disappear, they take some of the pixies with them. Griffin remarks that the Legendarium is one of the most powerful objects she's seen in the last 2 centuries. I'm interested to see how exactly the object is related to Selena's own power. Like, is it the Legendarium that's powerful and anyone can learn to use it? Or Selena is powerful and she would equally be able to read, I don't know, dragonology to life? Honestly, the episode at this point is really good. It gets the job done in terms of introducing the girls, the setting, the locations, and the differences between witches and fairies, and we are introduced to a really intriguing villain. Selena wasn't trying to be evil, but she caused destruction by a simple exercise of her power. And what an interesting power. It just sets up some really interesting tensions, and you are starting to see a season where the Winx are trying to fix up the messes caused by Selena's spells, and are wondering what intriguing conflict exactly will cause Selena's transformation into full antagonist against the Winx. And then... no! So the tricks show up again. They take over Cloud Tower again. Madame Griffin is transformed into a crow. At this point, Griffin has no right to be headmistress, as she loses control like every other season. It's odd how the witches immediately submit to the Trix's authority, like some of these girls have been imprisoned, transformed into zombies, and yeah, maybe that's a deterrent to rebellion, but also surely the Trix have a reputation now for being really defeatable. It's outfit change time, and honestly, they should really consider witch transformations in the reboot. Then we get this cool castle in the sky concept. Interested to see where it goes. Also, were there always Grim Reapers at the gates of Cloud Tower? The Trix send the witches off to their rooms, but not Selena. Instead, they seemingly want to recruit her. And again, this has potential. Is she genuinely going to become their fourth member? Is she a protege, or will they double-cross her once they figured out how to use the Legendarium themselves? Here's the thing, I actually don't mind the Trix being the main villains of the season, and I wouldn't have minded if they had gotten interested in Selena and recruited her halfway through the season or something. But doing this immediately in the first episode just ruins the tension and kills a lot of potential. Like, give Selena 5 minutes in the spotlight to develop her own dynamic with the Winx before the Trix take over again. Nevertheless, there's enough here to keep me intrigued. The episode ends with the Winx finding Griffin in crow form, off to find someone who can speak crowese. Despite the Trix disappointment, this episode remains quite good. There are cool conflicts introduced that I'm looking forward to seeing resolved, and most of its quirks I can forgive. I think if this had been my introduction to Winx, I would have been a little overwhelmed, but mostly excited for this cool new show. I wonder if this really had been intended as the first episode of the season, and then they tacked the Daphne episode on at a later stage. It might explain why it was awkward and rushed, with weird blocking and static fight scenes, and no real focus on the protagonists. It was nice to see Daphne transform for the first time, but her doubts in herself could have been explored throughout the season instead of in a pilot that does such a poor job of setting up the new stakes, story and themes of the season. But perhaps there was a really obvious reason for this, which will become evident as the season goes on. So I hope you're looking forward to going through season 6 with me. I'm trying to be easier about this and less scripted, but if you don't want to watch 12 of these, I think I may end up making a full review at the end with all my impressions properly organized. So I hope you're looking forward to all of that, and I will see you very soon. Bye!